Hi, I'm Jeff Brady with Roundtree Brady Insurance here in Savannah, Georgia.
Are historic homes harder or more expensive to insure?
Yes, so one of the things that you have to be very careful about is homes on a historic registry especially. Because if they're on the registry, here's what happens. That house has to be maintained to that historic level. Okay, so if it's plaster inside, plaster is much more expensive than sheetrock, right? Sometimes just the quality of the build is there. I mean, there's some beautiful homes in downtown Savannah, right? Absolutely stunning homes. You start getting into values, that can be more challenging. But historically, yes, because of what they have to go back with, but also the systems in a lot of these homes can be much older, right? So the risk there can be greater. So not only in value, also in what they have to go back with, we're seeing more what's called functional replacement costs, which means the insurance company has the option of saying, you can choose this, but if something happens, we're going back with sheetrock, with basically today's materials, as opposed to what some of these homes in downtown Savannah are built in the mid to late 1800s. So a lot of companies tend to shy away from that. So again, timeline, understanding what your costs are going to be, getting ahead of it early in the process is extremely important.
What should buyers know about older roofs in Savannah?
So an older roof, more companies are getting very sensitive to roof. It's a big cost. You think about a roof that's, it may be a 30-year architectural shingle, but you know how summers in Savannah are. It can be hot. Those roofs can be 150 degrees. That's going to break down a roof quicker, And so roof condition, is it missing shingles? Is granular loss? Can you see the glue lines underneath it from where they've lost so much of the granules on top? That may become a negotiating point, which again, buyer's agents at Heather Murphy Group know darn well how to handle that. And I think that's extremely important to recognize that up front, because it could cause a problem. Companies are going to do what's called a post-bind inspection. All right, so it's not your home inspection. So it's a risk analysis. So in Georgia, we have a 60-day underwriting period. That means that you can get to the closing table, and most companies are going to pull the clue report. If they're pulling credit, it's typically a soft hit, but they're going to look at that. They're going to do all this assessment up front, but they can't inspect every property that we quote. So we're buying coverage, you get to closing, and heaven forbid, in that first 60 days, they go out and you've got tree branches brushing up against a roof, it's missing shingles, they can actually cancel a policy. And so being, again, proactive on the front side, recognizing that roof condition, is not only is it potentially a big expense, but also it could preclude them from being able to continue their coverage even after they close. So nobody wants that surprise. Now, a lot of companies give you the flexibility that if it's not in the greatest of shape, they'll get you to the closing table, but you're going to put a new roof on there. Then you get the new roof on, you provide the evidence that it's been done, and you should be good to go. But obviously, if you can get it done on the front side, it could improve your premiums, make that debt-to-income ratio look a little bit better, make your payments on your home look a little bit better. So it's always a plus to be able to try to address that up front.
What upgrades can help lower premiums?
Yeah, so storm shutters, new roof, again, coastal Georgia, right? If we're talking Savannah, and especially the further east you get, you're going to get into what we call excess and surplus lines carriers. So your standard companies of the world, the big names that you're used to seeing, they may not want to get that far east, get that close to the ocean. So those other companies that are willing to do so, they want to know that HVAC system is being serviced and that it's up to date. Water heater. A lot of people think, the water heater, it still heats. Yeah, but do you realize how much of, deposits and buildup are in that thing? Have the connections been checked? So they want to see updates on that sort of stuff. The big ones, newer homes are going to have hurricane clips. They're going to have, more of the impact resistant windows. That's other things that help. Obviously a new roof is good. An architectural shingle versus say a 3-tab. If it looks almost like Lego blocks, where it's kind of like three-dimensional looking, that's an architectural shingle. It's heavier shingle, it's got a better wind resistance rating associated with it. The big thing we're also seeing more of is these building and housing standards where a fortified roof is there. It's not a requirement in code, However, we're seeing more insurers place an emphasis on that. In fact, state of Georgia passed a law that requires insurance companies to provide a discount if they have that fortified roof. So that was a change that took place in 2025. Hopefully in the long term we'll see more of that, because the better a house is built and the better the standards are that we have just in general, means that a home is it's got better longevity. A better built house is also more resilient against storms and things like that, which in turn means that your insurance costs don't have to, either they go down, they stay the same, or minimal increases, as opposed to some of the bigger changes we've seen.
How often should homeowners review or reshop insurance?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing with reviews is, first off, don't call your insurance agent 3 days before a hurricane is supposed to be coming in. We're reaching out daily in our office to do reviews with clients. If your agent's calling you to do a review, it's a great time to do a review. They don't have 1,000 other people trying to call and review their coverage at that point. But annually is huge. Stay up to date on what you've got. When you get your renewal, make sure you're paying attention to any potential changes. There's a lot of companies right now that, to renew a policy, they're forcing higher deductibles. And saying, look, if you're going to renew it, now you have to have a $2,500 all peril deductible, or you didn't have a wind and hail deductible in the past, now you do. Don't be caught, don't get a surprise. You get caught with your pants down in a situation after a storm, well, I didn't know. Well, they're sending you a renewal each year. It's a great time to go over that with your agent. Hopefully you're using an agent, not an 800 number. I'm big on local. We understand what goes on here. We've been through it. To borrow a phrase from one of our competitors, we've seen a thing or two. We've seen a lot of things. We had 1,100 claims in my agency after Hurricane Matthew. So you see what can take place. And then the people who maybe they bought on value, they tried to go back and just based on price, now they're getting that very unpleasant surprise that, what, you've got an $8,000 deductible. So the $5,000 worth of damage that you got, they're not paying anything. So review annually. As far as shopping, I can tell you with any insurer, you're never going to get their best shot if you're shopping every year. Loyalty is a big factor in a lot of that. So if you've been with an insurer for a longer period of time, not to say that you need to stay with somebody forever. Obviously, we love it when people stay with us. We're trying to, we want to continually improve on their experience. But typically you got to be at a minimum of 3 years, ideally 5. I can tell you, if you've been with somebody 5 years and you come to me, we're going to look at you much more favorably. A couple of reasons. One is you're not having claims, right? So that means you're probably maintaining your house. You're doing the things. You're a responsible person. You're going to get the best rates we've got. Credit scoring is probably strong. You're not a shopper. Because, and again, nothing wrong with shopping. People do it all the time, I get that. But insurers know that people who shop are not going to be able to get they're just not going to offer the best rates. You can say coverage, it's not a difference in coverage afforded, but you're just not going to get best rate. Reviewing annually is the big key. Because even if you're with somebody, if things have changed, maybe your credit's improved, right? We can reevaluate a policy that way. Maybe now we've got like the 1% versus a few years ago, maybe we could only write 2. Now's a great time for us to reevaluate. In fact, we've been moving some of our clients into the new policy because it's a better fit for them. So they get the longevity still, and then they're getting better coverage. Get to stay with us, which is we're happy about too.
Rapid fire questions, true or false?
Flood damage is covered under standard home insurance, true or false?
False.
The cheapest policy is usually the best. True.
False.
If I'm not in a flood zone, I don't need flood insurance.
False.
Market value determines how much insurance I need.
Replacement value determines how much insurance.
And older homes cannot be insured.
False.
If you could give one piece of advice to Savannah buyers and sellers about home insurance, what would it be?
One piece of advice is just start your process early. Get ahead of the curve, eliminate surprises. That way you can be informed about, what your costs are going to be, and what your coverage is going to look like. From a seller standpoint, obviously knowing your liability protection, making sure your coverage is in place. I'll tell you one thing that would be important. All right, so this is on the flood insurance side. If you're talking about marketing the property, okay? FEMA in 2021 changed over to risk rating 2.0. All right, it's a different pricing structure. And I see too many people who have flood insurance, especially in an X zone where they're not required to carry flood insurance, and think, "Oh, I'm selling this. I'm just gonna let my policy lapse." And they do that, and then now the buyer doesn't have an option of being able to take over that policy, and the buyer could potentially pay a lot more for flood insurance because of that. So keeping the coverage in place or having proof of it is important. You know, just from a home standpoint, I would say just making sure they maintain the house, because it's going to make it much easier for a buyer to be able to come in and get coverage.